Welcome to Echo, the podcast where we share our personal perspectives on questions about God, spirituality, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm Ryan Becker, your host. No matter who you are, we hope that you find value and encouragement through real discussions about real things. Let's jump in. Echo. Hey guys, welcome back to Echo. I'm really excited about today's episodes and today's guests. We have two good friends of mine here. To my left, we have Jessica Williams, and to my right, we have Harold Carvajal. So we're going to go ahead and just start with introductions. So Harold, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
All right. Well, I'm a transfer student, came to Southern. I'm in my sophomore year, going to graduate in finance, and I'm part of the improv team, and that's how I'm here for today.
Awesome. And Jessica, what about you?
Well, I actually have 13 years experience teaching Bible at Loma Linda Academy, and I just came to Southern about 4 months ago. Now I'm an admissions counselor here at Southern.
Awesome. Okay, so as we kind of jump in here, there are two warnings I want to give. The first of which is we are at the Collegedale Church in Collegedale, Tennessee, and they are in the middle of construction. So to our listeners, if you hear some weird noises, we lovingly refer to them as dying cows outside. There's no animals being harmed in the making of Echo. It's just some construction going on as they do some additions to the church. But we also want to thank the Collegedale Church and Southern for hosting us and allowing us to do this on their campus. So as is Echo tradition, we're going to jump right into the topic today, and it is a question, and I say this about every question because it's true of every question. It's a question that a lot of people wrestle with, and the question is this: how do I know if my prayer life or my devotional life is good enough, right? We try to compare to a lot of people. I know that when I was growing up and I would hear pastors talk about their prayer lives, it like shocked me. And even as a pastor, I could never even replicate some of the length of time that I've heard pastors be in prayer. I remember the one time when I was in class, an evangelist came and was our guest presenter when I was in college, and he talked about how every day he wakes up and for the first 4 hours of his day, starting at 4 a.m., he spends it in prayer. I still, at 25 years old, cannot conceptualize what 4 hours in prayer actually looks like. So it is difficult, right, to navigate and to figure out what's good and what's bad. So I think a good place to start here, if you guys are willing to share, is what does your current devotional life look like? And it's cool if it's kind of unrefined or still forming, that's totally fine, but I think that's a good place to start. So Jessica, what does your devotional life kind of look like?
Good question. Throughout my life, it's had a different look, I guess you could say. This year, since we just started the new year just a little while ago, I decided that I was going to read through the Bible in a year again. I did this, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, and I felt that it was really worthwhile. When I did it at first, I didn't make it through the entire Bible in a year. It took me like a year and a half, just because it's a lot to read in a day.
Yeah.
Or each day, I should say. But I really felt like I wanted to do that again, just because it gave me just a better understanding and looking at Scripture from a few steps back, rather than taking passages, shorter passages and looking at them more deeply. It's just a different feel, a different perspective.
Gotcha.
That you gain. So that's actually what I'm doing right now.
Are you doing that? Are you like reading straight through from Genesis to Revelation? Are you doing it in any order?
No, well, it's sort of in order. I found a plan online that actually, it has it so you read 5 days a week. That way you have 2 days to give you some wiggle room if you don't get through what you're reading in a day. But it actually starts with Genesis. So it has you read a couple chapters in Genesis, and then one of the Psalms, and then a chapter from Mark.
Okay.
That's what it's doing now. So you have a little bit of Old and New Testament. And
No, that's really, really cool. And I'm going to hit you up later for that plan because I
Sure.
am interested in it. All right, Harold, what about you? What does your devotional life look like?
Well, currently, just because it's a new year, so of course, new year, new me, as many people say. Right now, I'm trying to get into more reading devotionals. Right now, I'm trying to read I got a devotional as a gift in Christmas in Spanish for this upcoming year. So I'm planning on reading that and catching up. Also, a Bible that has a plan like Jessica, like read the Bible throughout a year. That seems interesting to do that because I did it before. I did it twice before. First time was straight through. Of course, that's a little hard because you often lose track of time.
Yeah.
Because the Bible's not written in chronological order, as many people know. It's always like this happened and like event 200 years later happened, and it goes back and retracts. So I'm trying to read in order of chronologically wise, so I can just like follow through. And of course, that plan also is smaller, like 3 chapters or 4 chapters of a book and split out. But I do like how it's like a little bit old, a little bit of New Testament. It gives a little diversity.
And see, for me, I have always struggled with reading the Bible straight through. I've done many plans, and part of the problem is I try to do it in the morning, and I'm terrible at waking up in the morning. I wait until the last possible moment to get out of bed, and there are moments where I have to fight and yell at myself in my own head, just, Ryan, get up. So the morning doesn't work for me, and at night sometimes I get distracted or I'll forget because I'm so tired from the day. And so I have always struggled to find that point in my day that it works. But for me, the other half of my struggle has been because I'm a pastor, just reading the text and generally thinking about it has not done much for me because that's kind of the first step when I was writing sermons or doing, Bible studies with people. And so I had to figure out a way to do this in a way that still challenged me and transformed me. And so what I chose to do was I will typically pick a book of the Bible and I'll read through it. And what I'll do is I'll actually stay a chapter a day, and I will stay in that chapter for a couple days, actually. So I'll take John 1 and I'll read it 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, and see what else I can pick out of it that I have never noticed before. And that helps me remember it better. That helps me remember the lessons better as well. So that's kind of how I've done this. And so thank you both for sharing what you're doing. I know there was a time I was talking to a professor, and he asked me, how's your devotional life? He was doing a mock interview with me, and I said, it's not where I want it to be. And he looked at me and he pushed back, and he said, yeah, that's the safe answer. And no one has their devotional life where they want it to be. And so he's like, give me legitimately, like what does, how many times a day do you read or how many times a week do you read your Bible? And he started to get me really, really specifically. And it was then that I really felt like it wasn't good enough. So I guess my question to you is, in the way that you're doing devotional life or in the way you're doing your prayer life, do you feel like you're growing closer to God, or how do you feel about it? Are there days where nothing happens? Are there days where something amazing happens? What is that journey like for you? Harold, can we start with you on that?
Yeah, I feel like, of course, prayer life and all that, it's really hard to keep track. Sometimes you get distracted, you forget to do a prayer, and you get to like, oh no, I didn't pray. I don't feel good now. And sometimes I can't really afford to lose time on prayer. And that always corresponds, you don't feel great, and during the day you don't feel like you're giving 100% because I didn't give time to God. Now how am I going to give 100% to everything else? Because if you don't give God 100% first, I can give your other priorities, your other tasks 100%, because you can't really focus on that.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And Jessica, what about you?
Yeah, well, if I could kind of look at my life, and in high school when I really started to begin a relationship with God, I would, during my devotional time, I would set aside a good hour or so to read and to pray. And when I got to college, it changed quite a bit for me because having a roommate and all that kind of stuff, it was really hard to make time. And so I really felt my devotional life really wasn't where it should be in college. And now when I think about it, I would really love to spend more time in prayer. I think most of my devotional time is spent reading and reflecting, and not as much time in prayer, but I try to spend time throughout the day praying like here and there, like when I'm driving or, using time, while I'm exercising or whatever to talk with God and just to try to incorporate that through my whole day. So while I, a lot of times I'll look back at high school and be like, wow, I spent an hour. But if I were to calculate, if it's not all about time, but if I were to calculate maybe through my day, it would probably be better than I think.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. No, that's fair. I think that's fair. And thank you for chronicling that journey, right? Because I think there are all different age groups that are listening to this podcast. I know we are aimed at a specific demographic, but everyone tunes in, and I think everyone is at a different part in their journey. And so I think what'll help in this conversation as we kind of move forward is let's, instead of asking off the bat, how do I know if my devotional life is good enough? I think a better question to start with as we move into this portion is, what's the goal of a devotional? What's the point of a devotional life? That I think is, we're just told we're supposed to do it because that's how you follow God, but there's not a whole lot of meat behind that answer or substance behind that answer. So what do you think? Open question. What do you think is the purpose of a devotional life or a prayer life?
I'd probably say the purpose is it to keep a constant connection, like a daily reminder that always, just somebody out there, God is listening to you, so always try to put a little bit of time for Him. Because I know some people they don't really follow devotionals, and the devotional life at least hey, don't forget out of your 20 minutes, 10 minutes, read a little chapter, read a verse quickly. Remember that this is important as well. They should always learn something. Because you always learn something. Like a 5-minute read, you could probably learn something that can help you in the future. It
Gotcha.
doesn't seem a little simple, seems so small, but it could be something that's so big.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy the amount of times that I've read or done my devotional life, and then something later in that day has somehow lined up with what I read, and I'm just sitting there going, what in the world? Or times when I was a pastor and I'd prepare a sermon, and somehow the sermon would line up with everything else in the service, and Sabbath school that morning, and I did not done
awesome.
any of that intentionally. And my members will come to me and say, this was incredible, or, today I guess I really needed to hear this if God's going to slam it into my head 4 times in a row through Sabbath school music and everything else. So, the way that some of that kind of plays out and how God moves is pretty cool. So thank you for that. And Jessica, what about you?
Yeah, I think the purpose of a devotional life is really just to get to know God and to get to know Jesus. And I think, some days are amazing, like you said. You really feel that God has a message for you, and you feel impressed, about something. And then other days are just oh, well, that was nice. Okay.
Yeah,
nice little short read.
Well, yeah, or maybe you notice something that you never had before, reading a particular text or whatever. But, I think looking at a relationship with God like you would a friendship, some days that you spend with a friend, hey, they're amazing, they're, whatever. And other days are just it's nice, but that time together just brings you closer together.
Oh, yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And build a stronger bond, going through shared experiences and all of that. And I think that is really what a devotional life
I think that's a really good point too, because there are friends that I have that all I do is have fun with them, and that's it. There are other friends that I have that we are able to dive deep together and have really powerful conversations and challenge each other. Yeah. But I think if my deeper friendships, if I couldn't have those times where we don't go deep and we're just hanging out and relaxing and nothing really gets done or nothing big happens, I think those friendships would be more stressful than they would be edifying or encouraging for me. I don't have the emotional energy to do this right now.
Yeah. Or you wouldn't even go deep, maybe.
Yeah,
with them.
exactly.
You'd be scared of what they would say, you didn't really know them on a personal level if you didn't do that.
Yeah. So I think I do like the friendship analogy, and I think the other side of it too is a relationship with God or a devotional life with God, while it is a lot like a friendship, at the same time, it's kind of not, because as far as scheduling time with God, that's on you. God's not going to call you. I mean, maybe He will sometime, but God doesn't always call you and say, hey, do you want to hang out later tonight? It's on you to prioritize that relationship with God. And I think part of why even the days where nothing happens are so important is because they are just in the action of doing them, we are prioritizing God and making sure that we build that habit of consistently spending time with him. And I think that's huge. So I do think there's a lot of importance in the days where, nothing kind of happened. I read some random chronology or genealogy in the Bible, and that was it today. I get that totally. So we've talked about the goal of it. We've getting closer to God, getting to know God more. So then, where do you draw the line as far as satisfaction in your devotional life? Where do you say, I'm okay here? How do you get to that point that you say, this is fine for me, this is what works for me, and this is what I want to do? Or are you still trying to figure that out? Because that's totally cool too.
I mean, currently I'm still trying to figure it out, but I feel like there's not really a set line, because you always spend, because Jesus spent many times, he spent 40 days, 40 nights in communication with his Father, with God. So I feel like there's no set lines, no set limit to how long you can spend in time with God in devotion, but it's sort of limit how long you spend time with God and also fit your personal life, because God cares about that as well. He wants you to enjoy your life, he wants you to live comfortably as well. So I feel like that could be a limit, but I feel like there's really no limit set.
Okay, yeah. And what about you?
Yeah, I think for different people it's different. I mean, for me, I like a little bit of variety, and that's why I'm choosing to read the Bible all the way through this year, just to change things up, because typically I would do what you had done before, read a book at a time and just go story by story or chapter by chapter. So to kind of switch things up just challenges me as well, I think. But I know people who, who love to sing and incorporate music, and they'll spend some time, their devotional time singing, or in worship. And so I just think different people, have different ways that they feel they can connect with God more. And I think it's just maybe trying some different things to kind of feel that out and see what really benefits you and where you feel that you can connect with God.
I think the three of us are a good example. That's why I'm glad we have three guests on, two guests and myself on the show, because it's not just one other perspective, but it's three perspectives being shared. And all three of us, our devotional life looks different. Our walk with God looks completely different. And Harold, my interactions with you, my friendship with you is different than my friendship and interactions with Jessica, especially since Jessica and I are now coworkers.
Yeah.
And it's just a completely different dynamic. And I would expect it to be the same with God. I think there are some people that can approach God as their best friend. I think there are others that, and I think I've talked about this on this podcast before, but there are others that will approach God and in prayer and they'll say, "Daddy," because because they didn't have a dad, or they didn't have a good dad. And so God becomes their expression of, this is the first time I've had a father and had a dad that I could count on and that I could trust. So there is room for the individual. There's a ton of room for the individual in Christianity and in a devotional life or prayer life. And so when I think of the question, how do I know that my prayer life or devotional life is good enough? I think for me, the answer to that question becomes, do I know more God now, or am I closer to God now than I was when I started this? I think that's how I know. Because I think, and maybe you disagree, maybe you agree, I don't know. You can jump in. Just know if you disagree, you're wrong. I think if you're getting closer to God, right, then something will look different in your life. And so you can usually mark how you might be approaching situations differently, or maybe, I won't say that your life will automatically get better because you're closer to God, but more your perspective on how you're walking through each situation changes. I don't know. What thoughts?
Yeah, I think another question to ask is, have I experienced growth? Through this, because I think it gets a little murky when we say, do I feel closer to God? Because feelings, come and go, and and we talked about this, not every day it's going to be amazing and you feel like you have a message from God or whatever. But I think if you have experienced growth and you've been challenged and, that kind of a thing, I think, what you're doing is is good.
Okay, yeah. Harold, any thoughts on that one?
I feel like there's always be growth because you have to it's a reflection. You have to look back. How you're now currently, this would not be the same you are a year later if you walk with God, talk with God every day. You say like, oh, I don't get as angry. I stopped using certain words. I stopped doing certain habits that were bad for me. You realize this is something that's like, oh, not be the click of a button. It's something that's a slow process. You don't really look at it. Results are not quick and go. They're like a slow building. It's a very slow process.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of place to end on, which is the idea that this is a slow process. God's got all of eternity in mind, so 1 month is nothing to Him when you're playing that long game. And so I think the other side of this is to recognize that this is a journey. It is not a quick fix. It is none of this is. And so you're along for the ride. Buckle up and pray and read and enjoy and immerse yourself in knowing God and growing closer to God. So Harold and Jessica, thank you guys so much for being on. I've really enjoyed your perspectives. And to our Echo listeners, thank you guys for being along for this journey. We hope this conversation was edifying to you or was just able to help you grow and get closer to God. And we just thank you so much for listening. And once again, a special thank you to Southern and to the Collegedale Church for allowing us the privilege of recording here and giving me the time off to be able to record this as well. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Echo. We hope you enjoyed it. To stay up to date with new episodes as we release them, and for more awesome content from Project Refresh, a ministry of the Carolina Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. And don't forget to like and leave a comment.